The PowerPoint slide went up at 10:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I checked my Timex old Marine habit. You track everything when lives depend on precision. The slide read Lean Manufacturing Protocol, Operational Excellence Initiative, and underneath it, in clean corporate font, developed by Preston Hayes, CEO. I'd built that protocol. Every efficiency metric, every workflow optimization, every safety checkpoint. 3 years of my life walking that factory floor at Heartland Steel Works, timing operations with a stopwatch, talking to welders and machinists, and crane operators who'd been bending steel longer than Preston had been breathing. The system that cut our waste by 34% and saved the company $2.3 million annually. The protocol that kept 180 families employed when other plants across Ohio were shutting down and shipping jobs overseas. Preston Hayes had been with Heartland Steel Works for 18 months. Before that, he was finishing his Stanford MBA. Before that, I don't know, doesn't matter. His name was on my slide. My name is Garrett Powell. I'm 48 years old. I spent 12 years in the Marine Corps, most of it in logistics and operations management. Learn how to keep supply lines running in places where failure meant people didn't come home. After discharge, I spent 16 years at Heartland Steel in Youngstown, Ohio, working my way up from floor supervisor to operations director. I built their manufacturing backbone from scratch, lean protocols, safety systems, supply chain integration for steel that goes into everything from bridges to battleships to the frame of your pickup truck. No fancy degree, no corner office politics, just the work. That's the setup. Here's what happened. Preston became CEO 14 months ago. His father, Norman Hayes, sits on our board of directors, been there since 2018, came in during the restructuring when half the regional steel companies were filing bankruptcy. The appointment got announced as bringing fresh strategic vision to American manufacturing. The press release mentioned Preston's innovative approach to operational optimization and commitment to lean transformation. Within 30 days, Preston was using phrases like operational paradigm shifts and streamlined workforce optimization in every meeting like he'd invented the concepts. I gave him 6 months to settle in. That seemed fair. New leadership needs time to understand how things actually work versus how they look on a business school case study. But by month 4, I started noticing changes. The weekly production briefings I'd run for 8 years. My calendar went blank. When I asked Preston about it, he smiled that practiced MBA smile. We're expanding stakeholder input, bringing more voices to the table, he said. The manufacturing landscape is evolving, Garrett. We need perspectives that can scale with transformation. I nodded and filed it away. 2 weeks later, my access to the manufacturing dashboard timed out. 8 years of real-time production data, performance metrics, efficiency tracking gone. Preston called it a system upgrade issue when I brought it up. Said it would look into it. IT never looked into it. The first hint of what was really coming happened during a safety meeting in March. Preston had invited some consultants from McKinsey to audit our operational readiness. 3 guys in identical Navy suits who'd probably never set foot on a factory floor before, taking notes while our shift supervisors explained quality control procedures. One of them asked Danny Rivers, our plant foreman, how we quantified acceptable tolerance variance in real-time production scenarios. Danny looked at me, then back at the consultant. We check the gauges, he said. If they're green, we're good. If they're red, we stop and fix whatever's wrong. The consultant wrote something down. After the meeting, I caught him talking to Preston by the loading dock. I was too far away to hear details, but I saw him point at the production floor and use the word optimization 3 times in 30 seconds. That's when Wade Torres came to see me. Wade's been our union rep for 15 years, straight shooter who knows every worker on the floor by name and exactly how many kids they're trying to put through college. He knocked on my office door and closed it behind him. Garrett, he said, the guys are hearing rumors, something about moving production offshore. I told him I hadn't heard anything official. That was true, but I'd started noticing other things. More consultants coming through once a week. Meetings I wasn't invited to but could see happening through conference room windows. Preston asking detailed questions about labor cost per unit and manufacturing flexibility scenarios during the monthly board updates. You know I trust you, Wade said, but these guys have been through this before. Plant in Akron closed in 2019. Youngstown Metals shipped their operation to Mexico in 2021. They all started the same way: consultants, efficiency audits, talk about competitiveness. Wade had a point. The manufacturing landscape in Ohio looked like a battlefield. Empty factories for lease signs on buildings that used to employ half a town. We'd survived because we'd gotten efficient, stayed competitive. The protocol I developed was a big part of that. It wasn't just about cutting waste. It was about proving that American manufacturing could work if you did it right. I'll keep my ears open, I told Wade. Anything concrete comes up, you'll be the first to know. He nodded and left. I sat in my office looking at the production floor through my window. 18 people down there, running equipment that hadn't missed a safety target in 3 years, making steel that met specs tighter than anything coming out of overseas plants. Building something that mattered. But I'd learned something in the Marines about reading situations before they turned critical. The confirmation came 3 weeks before the quarterly union meeting. I was walking back from the break room with my coffee when I heard voices from the conference room. Door was cracked open, and I recognized Preston's voice immediately. He was talking to his father, Norman. They hadn't seen me approach. The Mexico transition has to be finalized before the union contract renewal in September, Norman was saying 180 positions. We can keep maybe 30 for final assembly and shipping oversight. I stopped walking, not dramatically, just paused like I was checking my phone. The optics will be challenging, Preston replied. But if we frame it as competitive repositioning rather than layoffs, and we announce it alongside the efficiency gains from the new manufacturing protocol, the board will see it as strategic leadership. The protocol Garrett developed, the protocol the company developed under my strategic direction. Garrett's a good operations guy, but he thinks tactically. This requires strategic vision. Norman chuckled. Just make sure the transition is clean. No drama. These union guys can get emotional about job security. I kept walking, didn't speed up, didn't slow down, just continued back to my desk and sat down. That evening, I drove across town to see Earl Hutchinson, our general counsel. Earl had served 6 years in the Navy before law school. We'd worked together during the 2019 restructuring when half the steel companies in Ohio were reorganizing to avoid bankruptcy. Earl, I said, settling into the chair across from his desk, I need to ask you about something hypothetically. He set down his coffee and gave me that look lawyers get when they know the conversation just got serious. What kind of hypothetically? What happens to operational protocols and manufacturing procedures if someone gets terminated without cause? Earl pulled up the standard employment template on his laptop. Company retains all intellectual property, trade secrets, and operational procedures developed during the term of employment. Standard boilerplate language. He looked up. Why are you asking? I told him about a conversation I'd had with my old commanding officer, Colonel Martinez, back during the 2019 restructuring. The company was hemorrhaging money. Everybody was panicking about layoffs. Lawyers were circling. Martinez had taught us something in the core about operational security. You always build redundancy into critical systems. What if command structure gets compromised? What if supply lines get cut? What if the mission parameters change and you need leverage you didn't think you'd need? What if we modified that IP language? I asked Earl, what if operational protocols reverted to the developer upon termination without cause? Earl leaned back in his chair. He wasn't dismissive, just careful in that way. Lawyers are when they're thinking through implications. That's non-standard. Unusual enough that it would need board approval for any deviation from template employment terms. He scratched his chin. Of course, during a restructuring like we had in 2019, boards approve a lot of contract modifications without reading every detail, especially if it's buried in routine administrative paperwork. He paused. You planning something specific here? Just thinking about contingencies, I said. In the Marines, we called it operational security. You hope for the best, but you prepare for scenarios that seem impossible until they're not. Earl nodded slowly. It's not illegal. Boards approve unusual contract terms all the time when they're focused on bigger financial issues. The question is whether you can get it through without anyone noticing what it actually means. That last part he said almost to himself, but I heard it. The board signed off on 28 modified contracts during that restructuring. 27 of them were about stock options, pension adjustments, and salary deferrals. Mine had one additional clause buried in Section 4, subsection 6D. Upon termination without cause, all operational protocols, manufacturing procedures, and efficiency systems authored by the employee shall revert to said employee, including implementation codes, workflow specifications, safety procedures, and related technical documentation. Nobody questioned it. Nobody even flagged it for review. Everyone was watching the big numbers, the debt restructuring, the survival plan. A single paragraph in an operations director's contract didn't register as significant. I kept that modified contract in my gun safe at home for 5 years. Hoped I'd never need it. Filed it next to my discharge papers and my kids' birth certificates, important documents you pray you'll never need in an emergency. When Preston's name showed up on that slide, I knew I would need it, but I also knew that having a contract clause was just the first step. In the Marines, we learned that having authority on paper means nothing if you can't execute when the moment comes. So I spent the next 6 weeks building the technical infrastructure I might need. The manufacturing protocol wasn't just a document or a procedure manual. It was integrated into every system on the floor: quality control databases, safety monitoring, efficiency tracking, supply chain coordination. I'd built it that way deliberately because you can't run lean manufacturing with disconnected systems. Everything had to talk to everything else. But that integration also meant I could control access at multiple points. I wrote a small application in my spare time. Nothing fancy, just a clean interface that would let me revoke system credentials individually or all at once. I tested it 4 times on backup systems during weekend maintenance windows. It worked exactly as designed. Complete authentication lockout in under 60 seconds. I also documented everything, not out of paranoia, but out of the same operational discipline I'd learned in the Corps. Every protocol I developed, every efficiency improvement, every safety procedure, all of it properly attributed with timestamps, development notes, and performance metrics. 22 pages of documentation that proved exactly who had built what and when. The week before the quarterly meeting, I sat at my kitchen table after dinner going through a final checklist. My wife Linda was grading papers for her elementary school class. Our son Mason was working late at the electrical contractor's shop where he'd been learning the trade since graduation. Our daughter Haley was upstairs studying for her nursing boards. Linda looked up from her grading. "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay at work?" I told her about the conversation I'd overheard, about the Mexico plan, the protocol theft, the 180 families who were about to lose their livelihoods so a Stanford MBA could show quarterly profit improvements to his father's board. She set down her pen. "What are you going to do?" I told her about Clause 6D, showed her the documentation folder, the technical specifications, the system access protocols I developed. Linda's been keeping books for the elementary school district for 15 years. She understands how institutions work, how people in power make decisions that affect everyone else without thinking about the consequences. "You've been planning this for 5 years, she said. It wasn't a question. Hoping I'd never need it, I replied, but preparing, just in case. She was quiet for a moment, looking through the contract pages. "Garrett, they're not just stealing your work. They're destroying 180 families so some kid can prove himself to his daddy. That's Linda." She cut straight to the heart of things. The quarterly meeting was scheduled for the Marriott downtown, same place we'd held them for the past 6 years. Big ballroom with a capacity for 200 people. That Tuesday morning it held 140 union members, 12 board members, 6 plant supervisors for office staff, and 2 reporters from the Youngstown Business Journal. The room smelled like industrial coffee and the particular tension of people who'd been through these meetings before and knew when bad news was coming. I sat in the 4th row between Wade Torres and Danny Rivers. Wade had his notebook out, ready to take notes. Danny kept adjusting his safety glasses, a nervous habit I'd seen him develop whenever management started talking about strategic initiatives. Preston took the stage at 9 a.m. sharp. Pressed khakis, rolled sleeves, the calculated casual look they teach in business school. He'd clearly rehearsed this presentation multiple times. Every gesture looked practiced, every transition smooth. He clicked through 35 minutes of slides about competitive positioning and operational excellence and building for the future. "Heartland Steel has always been about innovation," he said, advancing to a slide about market challenges. "But innovation requires difficult decisions about how we compete in a global marketplace." The room was listening, but I could feel the tension building. These weren't corporate executives who dealt with this language every day. These were steel workers who'd heard enough restructuring speeches to know when someone was preparing them for bad news. At 10:47, the slide went up. My protocol with Preston's name on it. I checked my watch, noted the time, kept my face neutral. Around me, I could feel people shifting in their seats. Wade Torres was frowning at his notebook. Danny Rivers had stopped adjusting his glasses. Preston talked for 8 more minutes about the manufacturing improvements. My improvements, using language I recognized because I'd written the documentation he'd clearly memorized. He said our innovative approach 4 times. He said strategic implementation twice. He talked about operational excellence and lean transformation like he'd discovered these concepts himself. He didn't say my name once. Then he shifted gears. The room went quiet in that way crowds do when they sense something important coming. Heartland Steel is at an inflection point, Preston said, clicking to the next slide. To remain competitive in a global marketplace, we need to make strategic decisions about operational efficiency and cost structure. The next slide showed a map of North America with 2 dots highlighted Youngstown, Ohio, and Monterrey, Mexico. Effective January 1st, we'll be consolidating primary manufacturing operations to our new facility in Monterrey. This transition will allow us to maintain competitive pricing while preserving essential American jobs in final assembly, quality control, and shipping oversight. The room erupted. 140 steelworkers don't react quietly to news that their jobs are being shipped to Mexico. Wade Torres was on his feet immediately. Danny Rivers was shaking his head. Someone in the back shouted, "You're moving our jobs overseas?" 3 guys in the middle section started talking at once. A woman from the office staff was staring at the screen, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The reporters were taking notes, frantically. Preston raised his hand for quiet, but the room wasn't settling down. "We understand this is challenging news," he said, raising his voice slightly. "But we'll be retaining 30 positions for specialized operations that require American oversight, and everyone affected will receive a comprehensive severance package based on years of service. What about the protocol that saved us $2.3 million? Wade called out over the noise. "The efficiency system that's got your name on it now, that operational framework will obviously transfer with the manufacturing operations," Preston replied smoothly. "It's company-developed intellectual property designed to optimize our global competitiveness." That's when I stood up. The room was still buzzing with angry conversations, but something about my movement caught attention. A few people turned to look at me. "Before we continue," I said, loud enough for the room to hear, "could you have Earl read Clause 6D of my employment agreement into the record?" The room went quiet. Not gradually, all at once, like someone had turned down the volume. Preston's practiced smile didn't disappear immediately. It took about 4 seconds, like a machine slowly powering down. "This isn't really the venue for discussing individual employment specifics," Preston said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "Earl has the contract files on his laptop," I said, looking directly at Earl Hutchinson in the front row. "Section 4, subsection 6D. The board approved it in 2019. Earl had his laptop open because Preston had asked him to have termination paperwork ready for after the meeting. I watched him find the file, scan through it, then look up at Preston with an expression I recognized from his Navy days. The look of someone who just realized the tactical situation had completely changed. "Earl," I said, "please read that clause aloud for the union members." The silence was complete now. 140 people waiting. Earl cleared his throat and read into the open air of the ballroom. "Upon termination without cause, all operational protocols, manufacturing procedures, and efficiency systems authored by the employee shall revert to said employee, including implementation codes, workflow specifications, safety procedures, and related technical documentation." The silence lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then everyone started talking at once, not shouting, something more urgent than that. The kind of noise a room makes when 140 people are doing math simultaneously, and nobody likes the answer they're getting. Wade Torres looked at me, then at Preston, then back at the contract language Earl had just read. "So if you fire Garrett to move his system to Mexico, he takes the whole protocol with him. That language was never intended to apply to core operational systems," Preston said quickly. He was trying to regain control, work the room the way he'd been trained to. "It's administrative formality language that got included during the 2019 restructuring." "It's a signed contract," Earl said quietly. "Board-approved modification with specific deviation documentation. This isn't boilerplate language, Preston. This was deliberately negotiated and approved." Preston stepped away from the podium. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. "We can discuss the legal specifics in a more appropriate setting. Right now, I'd like to focus on the strategic vision for." "I'm revoking access now," I said. I pulled out my phone and opened the app I'd built 6 weeks earlier. Clean interface, simple function, one confirmation screen, One button. I'd tested it 4 times on backup systems during weekend maintenance. I pressed confirm. The screens behind Preston flickered first. His PowerPoint presentation dropped off the main projector. Then the manufacturing displays around the room started switching over one by one. Heartland had set up live feeds so union members could see real-time production data during quarterly meetings, proof that things were running smoothly while we talked. Those displays went dark, then came back up with new messages. Lean manufacturing protocol, access denied, safety system integration, credentials invalid. Quality control pipeline, authentication required, supply chain optimization, connection terminated, efficiency tracking database, user authorization revoked. Danny Rivers had his laptop open, typing frantically. He was trying to log in to the production systems from his supervisor account. I watched him work for about 90 seconds, then stop. He looked up at the room with the expression of a man who just discovered that everything he thought he understood about the operation was completely wrong. "We're locked out," he said. His voice was quiet, but the microphone on his table picked it up and carried it through the room. Every system, every protocol, everything. Someone in the back said he actually did it. Preston came down off the stage. He walked straight to me, stopped close enough that I could see the perspiration on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "This is sabotage," he said, keeping his voice low but intense. "You're destroying 180 jobs out of spite." "No," I said, looking directly at him. "You were destroying 180 jobs for quarterly profit margins. I'm protecting operational security." Wade Torres stood up and addressed the room. "I want everyone to hear this clearly. I move for an emergency vote of no confidence in current management leadership." "Seconded," came from 6 different voices immediately. The reporters were writing frantically. One of them had started recording on his phone. Preston turned to his father in the front row. Norman Hayes was typing on his phone, probably calling lawyers. "This is illegal," Preston said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "We'll have injunctions filed by end of business today." Earl Hutchinson stood up. "Actually, you won't. This is intellectual property protection under a valid employment contract. Garrett has legal standing to control access to systems he authored and developed." I turned to address the full room. "Emergency licensing for immediate system restoration. $75,000 per month, 6-month minimum payable in advance. Or you can rebuild the manufacturing protocols from scratch. Figure 18 to 24 months without the operational knowledge that makes this plant competitive." "That's extortion," someone called from the board section. "That's market rate for specialized manufacturing IP," I replied. "You're welcome to get competing quotes from other operational efficiency consultants." I picked up my jacket and walked out. Not fast, not slow. Through the ballroom, past the networking tables nobody was using anymore, through the lobby where hotel staff were pretending not to notice the commotion, and out into a Tuesday morning in Youngstown that felt exactly the same as any other. Traffic on the street, people going to work, the world not knowing that somewhere behind me, 140 steelworkers had just discovered what happens when you try to offshore the guy who built your operation. My phone started ringing before I reached my truck. Preston, then Norman, then numbers I didn't recognize. I let them all go to voicemail and drove home. The emergency licensing agreement arrived by email 23 minutes later. I read it twice, marked up the payment terms, sent back a revised version. Earl called within the hour. "Board approved," he said. He sounded tired. "Your terms, $75,000 per month, 6-month minimum." "I'll restore safety systems this afternoon," I said. "Full operational restoration when the first payment clears." "Understood." A pause. "Garrett, the offshore rebuild they'll try after this. You know they'll attempt it." "Course they will," I said. "People like Preston don't accept the first answer. They try to work around problems instead of solving them." I spent that afternoon restoring systems in priority order. Safety systems first, then quality control, then production optimization. Everything back online within 6 hours. Clean, professional, no data loss. The first payment cleared Thursday morning. 6 weeks later, my old platoon sergeant Tony Martinez called. Tony had gone through his own version of this story at a defense contractor in Pennsylvania. "Different industry, same basic plot. You actually pulled it off," he said. "Now comes the hard part," I said. "Building something better." We incorporated Powell Manufacturing Solutions 8 weeks later. Tony handles business development. I focus on operations and engineering culture. 2 Marines in their late 40s who learned the hard way that loyalty is a two-way street. Our first client was a machine parts plant in Cleveland that had been getting squeezed by overseas competition. We built them a quality control system that caught defects before they reached customers. When the plant manager called me 3 weeks after implementation to say their overnight shift had flagged a tolerance variance at 2 a.m. without any human intervention, I felt something I hadn't felt in years at work. Like the job meant something again. Preston Hayes lasted 6 more weeks at Heartland. The board removed him after the Mexico plan became public, and 3 major clients started asking uncomfortable questions about operational stability. Norman Hayes resigned 2 weeks later. The business press called it leadership transition to support operational continuity. Nobody in the industry believed that language. Heartland brought in Sarah Chen as CEO, promoted from VP of operations at a plant in Pittsburgh. First thing she did was offer me my job back with a 40% raise. I declined. Second thing she did was implement a policy that operational developers retain ownership rights to their innovations. Smart move. Powell Manufacturing Solutions has 15 engineers today. We work across Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, helping manufacturers build systems that can't be easily replicated or transferred. Every engineer who works here owns their code from day one. My daughter Haley finished nursing school debt-free. My son Mason got his electrician's license and works for a contractor that values American-trained tradesmen. Linda still teaches elementary school and listens to my war stories over dinner. If you're reading this and any part of it sounds familiar, the meetings you stopped getting invited to, the younger hire positioning themselves as your replacement while presenting your work under their name, the slow squeeze that nobody announces officially, I want to tell you something directly. You built something real that has value, whether or not the people above you understand it. Document everything, not out of paranoia, out of professional accuracy. Read your contracts, all of them. If you don't like what they say, you still have leverage right now. Use it. Experience doesn't protect itself automatically. You have to build the protection in deliberately, the same way you build redundancy into any system that can't afford to fail. The best move I ever made wasn't revoking those access codes in a hotel ballroom. It was asking a quiet question to a lawyer in 2019 and making sure the answer was written into my contract.
Some days feel off, like I'm standing but still falling. A little pain, a little tired, and no one to tell it all to. There are days that feel unsteady, like I'm drifting out of place. Every step just feels so heavy, with a smile I have to fake. A little hurt I keep inside me, a little weight I always hide, and 1,000 quiet worries I've been holding deep inside. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, a little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I keep walking through the silence like it's all I've ever known. Every crowded room reminds me how it feels to be alone. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. Maybe one day I'll be stronger, maybe I'll learn how to speak, but for now I keep it buried in the parts of me too weak. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. Don't pity me. My heart doesn't need your mercy. I can still stand on my own. I was broken by your leaving, fell deeper than I thought I would. But pain has taught me how to heal now and survive what once I couldn't. You don't have to look back sadly, don't reach out with guilty hands. What you shattered made me stronger. Now I rise where I once collapsed. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll learn to breathe again. I once begged for your affection, now I've learned my worth in scars. And the man you left in pieces found his own way through the dark. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll learn to breathe again. Begun. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll rise alone again. I'll rise alone